or welcome. Hope you're doing well whenever you watch this. So, doing my monthly check-in. This is going to be discussing version 3 or Mark 3 of my mini book, if you will, the roadmap of self-transformation. This is something that I initially developed for myself to help me get through some hard times, and I figured, really as I put it out into the world, that will kind of first of all incentivize me to work on it more, right? If you put out if you put out the same draft a month from now, that's a little bit of a problem. But using that to basically pressure myself to improve it, and then also really the hope is that as I get this refined and as I start using it myself to become more successful and more happy and more settled in my life, hopefully you can use the best practices yourselves as well, right? I want other people to benefit from, I guess, my success, if you will. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just talk you through what's been going on since the last time I showed you this, and then hopefully wrap it up in a reasonable time. So there's a table of contents, much like always. It's pretty much the same. I guess the only difference that you'll see if you were reading it last month is that I actually have stage 1 pretty cleaned up. So it's not in a draft stage anymore. I would consider everything up to the end of stage 1 as pretty solid, actually, which is really the biggest accomplishment of this over the past month, really. And then everything else is still in a bit of a draft stage, but I'll talk you through that. Next up, I have the same preface as last month. I didn't really feel like I needed to change that because I still think the intention of mine or the message in there is still relevant. I want this book to be something that reflects reality, right? And I don't really want to, even if I decide to publish this on the off chance that I'll even be able to do that, I don't think I want to make this hyper publicized until I personally have gone through all of the stages myself and I could vouch firsthand of its effectiveness. And you could look at my life as proof of it being successful as opposed to it just being merely interesting, right? Similarly, I kept the one sentence summary the same. I really like how Dave summarized the hero's journey. The hero's journey being a series of external tests that, when passed, transform the inner self. I really like that definition. It really summarizes it. So I kept that. Now, I want to say the biggest thing you're going to see, as I mentioned, is stage 1. Stage 1, I did mention this last month. I did kind of really make the wording as sharp as possible because I wanted the stakes for myself to be very high every time I looked at this, because this is what's at stake, right? If I don't overcome my default, if I don't overcome my years and decades of bad habits and bad momentum, I'm probably going to kill myself. And I don't mean this in an attention-seeking sort of way. I just know, just from a factual point of view, I've just been in that dark mind space enough to where I'm like, okay, if I'm not careful and if I don't really find a way to solve this, I'm not going to be around very long, right? So a lot of the wording is the same from last month. But the biggest difference, and I think this is really this is probably going to be the central truth, if you will, of this document, is really the solution for every stage ultimately is to really ignore the current situation somehow, including all of the problems that are piling up, all of my life issues piling up, all of my bad habits piling up. There's a way in which I realize if I focus too much on the volume of problems I have, I'm just gonna get overwhelmed, right? So there needs to be kind of a artificial cutting off of really worrying about that. And then the second part of that is really focusing on the very next tiny improvement I'm willing to make in my life right now. Not 2 minutes from now, not 5 minutes from now. This is a very immediate solution. And this has really been something that I truly believe in, because honestly, it's like, what other choice do I have, right? That's kind of what I wrote, right? It's like there doesn't seem to be an alternative. Either I'm making a tiny improvement right now or I'm not moving at all, right? And worse yet, I'm probably going to get overwhelmed by just how much problems I have in my life, and I'll just be discouraged and I'll just keep moving backwards, right? So that's why I bolded it and underlined it, because this is really the core of this chapter, and really the core. I would argue that, I mean, we'll see in a couple months, but for now, I'm viewing this as one of the one of the pillars of this book, if you will, one of the central truths. If you took nothing else away, if you took this bolded and underlined thing, you're probably going to succeed, right? And so that's kind of what that section's at. I kept the images pretty much the same. I did add original sin and fallen nature because that's really how it feels. I did grow up Christian, so I guess that's why I resonate with that a little bit more. But even if you're not Christian, I mean, this notion of there's something fucking wrong, like that feeling is how I feel when I'm in a downward spiral. It's like, why am I messing everything up? That's kind of the feeling. And I do think that original sin and fallen nature, even though I don't necessarily believe in that literally existing, I do believe that that's a really great image, a really great vibe for what I feel whenever I'm in that dark space, right? I kept all the other images the same. Tony Stark in the cave, feeling discouraged, feeling defeated, right? And then, building his way out of that. And then similarly, Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight Rises, I think is probably one of the more powerful images, where he was broken. He was basically defeated by his enemy, and really by his bad habits. I mean, not to tangent too much, but The Dark Knight Rises is kind of Bruce's fault, like because he didn't prepare. He was so arrogant in his way of doing things that his enemy defeated him thoroughly, and that was totally his fault. But even in that downward spiral, in the pit of hell, basically, that's a very powerful image of him standing up after a great deal of pain and then taking his first initial steps. And that's kind of how it feels to start climbing out of that hell of really suicidal thoughts. I mean, suicidal ideation, your life as a living like shit mess. Like that's really the first step emotionally. And then finally, when it comes to like the actual examples, the evidence, the encouragement from a practical level, I did leverage Peterson, and unsurprisingly, or maybe not to let me just say this: Peterson's going to be a very huge influence on the rest of this book, to be honest. But I did kind of get his advice on starting extremely small. He has very practical steps on how to do that, which I stole. And then a lot of James Clear quotes. James Clear talking about doing something for 1 minute, doing something for 1 page, talking about the value of that, and feel free to read that if you have time. And then similarly, leveraging or putting yourself in a position to succeed by putting yourself in environments that make it easy to make tiny steps, right? And I don't know if this is necessarily the best place, this quote, but I did include it here for now. Now, that's stage 1. And I think, like I said, stage 1 is probably the most complete out of all of these stages, because everything else here is still in a bit of an experiment stage. I'm experimenting in my life ultimately with these, and I'm trying to see which one is the most sustainable. Now, stage 2 kind of gets into the valley of discouragement, or what James Clear calls the valley of disappointment. This is a very, 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 very painful stage as well. This is pretty much the stage I'm in right now, where you're far enough out of the downward spiral to where you're not necessarily worried about killing yourself, at least in my case, but you're still really just discouraged. Like you're like, because you're looking around, you're like, well, I'm not making progress fast enough. I still have all of these intense amount of problems around me. There are people around me who are succeeding way faster than me, or there are people around me that are discouraging me from trying to get out of this problem. And either by distracting me, or basically discouraging me, emotionally, saying, hey, why are you being so hard on yourself, or hey, why are you trying to be better than us? I've gotten a few of those. This shit sucks, and again, this is a very, very, very rough draft, in the sense of I don't fully know the answer to it, but my intuition, my gut is telling me that what needs to happen in this stage is a mindset shift. Because if you're like I said in the previous stage, ultimately you need to still ignore your current situation and keep working on those tiny improvements. But if this is kind of one of those stages where you're emotionally drained, or I'm emotionally drained rather, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to get out of it. So it's not enough for me to say, oh, do more tiny improvements, because like I'm so emotionally drained and discouraged that I don't even know if I want to do that. So what needs to happen, at least my gut, is that there needs to be a mindset shift that makes the process of getting out of hell more positive and enjoyable. And for me, at least, the most enjoyable way to do that is, for me, I'm leveraging my childhood of like training arcs, training montages, right? I grew up on anime, I grew up on movies. So leveraging this mindset of, hey, dude, I'm just in training right now. Like, and look out, when I'm out of training, I'm about to kick everyone's ass. The training montage to me has always appealed to me, because on the one hand, you can see how weak the character was at the beginning, but then you can also see this power developing, and even these little glimpses of power, especially in anime, these little glimpses of greatness, even in the midst of the training. And so for me, The only problem with that is, and that's why it's still a draft, is that that's still very abstract. And I'm a very abstract guy, and I get that. But even for me, the problem is that when I'm like at work and I'm discouraged, or when I'm talking to someone and trying to build a friendship and I'm discouraged, or I'm looking on Instagram for the fifth time and I'm discouraged by how far people are, the problem with that is that I can't just saying, oh, I want a training arc isn't enough. I need to make this more practical. And so that's why I stopped the draft at this stage. And so everything after this, let's say, point is basically questions, right? Or experiments that I'm running in my life. One of the studies or one of the experiments is reflecting on the past, right? Or reframing the past, right? And what I mean by that is much like in a story, much like in a fiction, the training arc only makes sense in the context of a larger story, right? And usually you don't really appreciate the training arc until you've seen the end and the beginning simultaneously. So there are two ways in which I am guessing that I would need to do that, but again, I need to experiment with it. One is journaling or writing about my past and contextualizing my present pain in the context of my past, right? Have I improved from my past? Am I still repeating bad habits from the past? So on and so forth, right? And much like a training arc, the whole goal is by reframing the past, one, you need to start looking for those glimpses of potential, right? The glimpses of the future within your past, right? But like in a training arc, you see them accidentally do this super cool move, and then later on in the movie or the show, they do it more professionally, right? And the second thing is more journaling about the future, right? Can I predict or can I write out what my future will probably look like based on the trajectory of my current situation? Now, again, these are guesses. I'm not entirely sure, right? I do think that things like Jordan Peterson's self-authoring suite, his past authoring suite, and his future authoring suite are going to be good pieces of evidence in case that this is the answer. Because one thing that he talks about very much in his basically is something he sells, but I don't know why, because you could do it for free. But he talks about the benefits of writing, right? Where let's use the past authoring specifically. Really, if you have memories that are more than 18 months that are still intruding on your thoughts or still evoke emotion, such as fear, regret, or shame, or confusion, your mind has not been able to fully process your past experiences, and the brain areas associated with negative emotions still regard the past events as unresolved threats. And so, by journaling about the past and making it more positive and more contextual via this training arc, let's say, worldview, I'm basically freeing up physiological resources, right? So instead of being stressed all the fucking time, that will give me more energy and probably more positive emotion to get through my current problems. And then similarly, journaling about the future, there are a lot, I mean, he has a lot of evidence really for the future authoring suite. Like, so for example, one of the ones he loves saying a lot is that for students who in universities that do future authoring suite, basically journaling about their future and how they're going to get there. Not only does it help those students avoid dropping out, but it also improves their performance in terms of grade performance average or grade point average and the number of credits earned. So it basically makes people more ambitious and accomplish more. So, and this is just university. So for me, it's like, okay, just imagine what you can do in the rest of your life, right? And then I have my own, I have a lot of my images, a lot of these, and I'm telling you, these are way too much. I know I need to narrow these down, but these are coming from my childhood, man. I love these. So One Piece, I got a hell of a lot of training arc shit, right? A lot, right? Naruto probably is gonna have just as much, if not more, of training arc quotes. Bleach, Hunter x Hunter, Dark Knight trilogy, Iron Man trilogy, Rocky. Oh my God, how many training arcs are in there? And then Creed, which is kind of the sequel to Rocky. So there's plenty of training arcs there. And then I have a bunch of quotes. I'm not going to go through all these. There are a lot of quotes. Gary V quotes about, Gary V has this notion of macro patience, micro speed, right? So it's like, do a lot during the day, but when it comes to how you approach your year, you have to be extremely patient, right? There's kind of like a quote, which I need to add in here, which is like, people overestimate what they can get done in a day, and they underestimate what they can get done in a year. And that's kind of the basic concept of a training arc, right? Where it's like every day you're getting thrashed, but then there comes a point where you really, you overcome your initial weaknesses and you show more of that greatness that people probably saw in you, but was a little bit more childish because it was underdeveloped. There's gonna be a lot of nerdy shit, Peterson shit, James Clear, a lot of James Clear, Farnham Street. I don't know if you know about that blog, but I love that blog. They talk a lot about mental models, and I do think that one of the most important mental models when it comes to training arcs is the concept of critical mass, right? So much like in I think it's chemistry, where there's a certain threshold that if you pass it, you like transform completely. James Clear calls it the plateau of latent potential, but in chemistry, and I think it's chemistry, where there's this tipping point. I think the same is true for training arcs. And then there's just a bunch of other stuff. This is way, like I said, there's way too many quotes. There's way too much here. And I think until the only problem is until I have a definitive answer, I won't know what to eliminate just yet. But once I do know, I will definitely start eliminating. Because even for me, this is way too many quotes. This is way too much to use. Okay. Now, stage three and four are going to be guesses. So I'm going to just skim this. I do believe that after that training arc or that disappointment phase, there comes what people call overnight success, right? Where all of a sudden you're getting, you pass that tipping point, like I said, and all of a sudden people think you're now impressive. Oh my gosh, how did you accomplish this? You start making more money, you start getting more friends. And I'm putting that shit in quotes because I don't trust these people. I really don't. Like people who just come around when you're winning, I don't trust those people. But anyway, they're gonna come around. That's just human nature. Or really, you're also gonna have people come around that start hating on you and start blaming you for stuff and start nitpicking everything you do because they're either jealous or they're furious that someone as weak as you is getting attention. Which is, I mean, I get that. If you saw me when I was weak, now that I'm getting more attention, of course you're gonna be mad. I understand that, but it's still fucking annoying. So like I have to prepare for that. But because I'm not fully there, I'm there in certain small areas of my life. But because I'm not really experiencing it deeply, I haven't really improved. I haven't touched this area. I'm like, I know this is vaguely a thing, but let me wait until I get out of hell first before I start talking about these, people on my dick and stuff like that. So I kept that there. The images are still going to be vague. The examples also are still going to be vague because, again, until I'm experiencing it firsthand, it's just going to be abstract guesses. Like, don't even worry about that. And then finally, the same thing with stage four, the born again transformation. This is like completely a myth because I've definitely not experienced this yet. But I do know through my research that there are certain people throughout history that have kind of reported this, as well as certain images and myths and shows that kind of, embody that, right? So, for example, Bruce Wayne turning into something more elemental, more terrifying in the case of the Batman, creating that, he became a different being, basically, through this long process of transformation that he did prior to the Batman, really. And Batman Begins is a good example of that. But there's a lot of, like I said, there's going to be a lot of abstract stuff here. Just don't even worry about this. I would argue don't even worry about this for a little while. Like, because I'm not going to be able to, like, tell you, like, definitively for like another decade basically. So maybe a little bit less than that, but just if you want to be entertained or if you want random quotes, feel free to skim it, but don't worry about it. And then finally there's the conclusion. I wrote this in a very dark spot, so it's still very it's kind of sad to reread, to be honest. But I kept it because I do think it's still representative of where I'm at in life. I do want to say though that by the time I'm done with this, I'm gonna change this for sure. But for now, until I've grown out of my weaknesses, it's gonna still be a kind of weak conclusion, to be honest. So that's about it, to be honest. I am proud of getting stage one pretty settled. And now I'm kind of just attacking stage two. I do feel confidently that everything I have in stage one is legit. So, I definitely think that if you're struggling in a similar way, feel free to kind of steal some stuff in here. But I would say other than that, now I'm trying to attack stage two in my life. And as I do that, I'll start narrowing down on it, make it a little bit more clear, and, hopefully make it something valuable for everyone else who's going through something like that. So, really appreciate you guys watching. And following along. The full link is in the description as always. And, if you have any comments or any feedback, or if you're going through something similar, but something else is working for you, I mean, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to have those conversations. So yeah, definitely message me, or I have Snug as well. Some people prefer that, or we can just talk one-on-one. So that's it. Hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you in the next video I make.